This is Jane Gackenbach speaking to you about the psychology of video gameplay on webtalkradio.net.
Do you think that making typically young men, but not always, also, there's young women in there as well, who are playing combat-centric games, aware of the realities of war in this fashion, do you think it's changing some attitudes? I know we've talked about the whole resistance stuff. What about those who feel like this has been enlightening in some ways?
Well, this is a question of effects, and difficult territory to untangle in a certain way, because this kind of work is done by people who ask these questions in laboratory situations and do a lot of survey research and things like that. And so it's difficult for me as a person who studies these things from a rhetorical standpoint and tries to suss out exactly what stories are being told, to make claims about how these media are affecting our ideas about what violence entails, or how acceptable violence is going to be. So, the people I've talked to have indicated to me that they're able to compartmentalize their lives and be able to play Call of Duty, even though the newest Call of Duty directly refers to the ongoing war on terror.
Yeah.
Right? But they're able to compartmentalize their political beliefs and their political lives from the gaming experience, which is kind of this, virtual simulacrum of that political existence. My question is, there are all these attempts and entrees on the part of game manufacturers to breach that boundary, to connect the games to political realities in ways that are perceived as even more authentic and give even more credibility to the game. So, for instance, the advertising blitz that accompanied Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 included a quote-unquote documentary that was circulating on YouTube that featured Oliver North and a guy named Peter Singer, who has been probably the most recognizable name in the intellectual world, one of the voices that has been loudest in terms of calling on people to reconcile the ethical problems that are accompanying drone warfare. And these two people appear in this documentary film and talk about what the future is going to be like, what drones are going to bring us, and what we can expect, and all the problems that will arise because of a remote control mechanized cyber army of the future. This is an effort on the part of game makers to connect the realities of drone warfare to the game and to breach that boundary. So it's becoming more and more difficult for us to compartmentalize these things. Asteroids of the past was easy to compartmentalize, but Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is not.
You want to know what the war of the future is going to look like? I don't think the average American grasps how violent war is about to become.
The next few years are going to see a wide array of technology that allows you to blow things up, to kill, in a way we've never seen before in history. A lot of these will sound like things out of science fiction. Things like directed energy, which is basically lasers made real. Exoskeletons, camouflage thought of in an entirely new way. They're getting smarter. The weapon itself is becoming more independent. What happens next?
There's going to come a time when this technology is going to catch up with us. I have a nightmare scenario that a hacker breaks into our system that controls satellites, UAVs, even the launch of missiles. Consider what it would be like to have friendly fire from U.S. weapons overhead.
The disconnect between how fast the technology is coming and our reaction time, the distance between those two is growing. Some of the most advanced technologies are not just going to be in the hands of the big boys anymore. What if terrorists could get their hands on this?
There is no longer a defined battle space. The enemy could be anywhere, and it could be anyone. I don't worry about a guy that wants to hijack a plane. I worry about the guy who wants to hijack all the planes.
The future is not as far off as most people think. we're not ready for it. The airplane. No one thinks they're possible. In fact, in 1903, the New York Times said it would take from 1 to 10 million years to build the first working flying machine. They said that the same exact year that the Wright brothers start to build the first working flying machine. Moore's Law, the idea that our technology is getting more and more advanced year after year after year, that's definitely happening. Now, the interesting thing is what happens next. If the pace of technologic change stays the same, within 25 years, our technologies, our computers, our robots will be 1 billion times more powerful than today.
The technology of the day is such that the most sophisticated weapons and equipment ever divined by the hand and mind of man are used by special operators, those who commit themselves to the life of black operations. The pairing of a special operator with remarkable technology that allows them to see from overhead, to see at night what's out in front of them, to detonate something on top of an enemy is extraordinary. It's what makes our black operators so remarkably lethal on the battlefield.
When you're able to see around corners, see through walls, and move cameras into positions that you wouldn't be able to move without putting yourself at risk, that's going to create even more of an advantage.
With these technologies, with robotics in particular, the next generation are going to be even more advanced and used in even greater numbers.
Probably the best illustration I can give of how fast technology has gone and how much it's changing what's possible in war or not. One of those little greeting cards that you open up and plays a song
has more computing power than the entire US Army had when the Vietnam War started. That's technology's impact on war. There's this pattern in history where there's technologies that are in the realm of science fiction, and then they become real, and then they're used in war. The drone was just a flying pair of binoculars. And then they see the bad guy, and they want to do something about it. And then they specially design robotics to be armed. They can carry 3,000 pounds of bombs and missiles. Our invasion force went into Iraq with 0 of these unmanned aerial systems, or drones as they're sometimes called. The U.S. military right now has more than 7,000 of these systems.
They're comforting when you hear the hum of the drones above, and especially when you're in a real bad neighborhood in the middle of Baghdad, and you can't see them, it's in the middle of the night, but you can hear them.
Today, with an unmanned aerial vehicle, you can fire a Hellfire missile 3 feet from a friendly and have no friendly casualties and take out the enemy on the other side of a wall. You couldn't do that 15 years ago.
A lot of this will sound like things out of science fiction. Some we've even gotten the ideas for them out of science fiction.
Lasers made real, exoskeletons, camouflage thought of in an entirely new way. The full range of unmanned systems or robotics that's being used in war, it's almost like going to the zoo and saying, what animals are they? Now we're seeing them taking their ideas from nature. The future is not as far off as most people think. We all have software glitches. They happen all the time. Last year, one computer in Atlanta shut down the entire US airspace. Over 600 passenger jets all had to land immediately because of one software glitch. Some of these examples of what people in the robotics industry call oops moments. This comes from a vice president at a robotics company that makes things for the US military. And he said, when things don't work out with your robot, it's just an oops moment. About 2 years ago in South Africa, there was a military training exercise, and an automated anti-aircraft cannon was supposed to fire upwards into the sky. And instead, because of what an investigative report called a software glitch, it leveled and it started firing in a circle. It killed 9 soldiers before it ran out of ammunition. What do we do in response to these oops moments that actually killed people? Now apply that over to war, and we get some really disturbing things that have already happened, and of course, really worrisome scenarios in the future.
And something we've invested in heavily are these drones. And the drones are little more than airframes and programming. But the programming is something we have to protect. Something that we have to make sure that no one gains access to or hacks into.
There have been unmanned aerial vehicles that have been lost. They've been perhaps commandeered by a hostile power. I have a nightmare scenario that a hacker breaks into our system, takes control of an unmanned aerial vehicle, and delivers that ordnance that's aboard it, protecting American troops, and instead fires them at those troops.
We may have the best technology, but someday down the road, your enemy's going to use it against you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
There's no such thing as a good or a bad technology. Robotics is the same. It's essentially a computer that can get up and walk or get up and fly. It's the users and their intent that determines whether its impact is good or bad.
You know, if there are guys out there who are smart enough to hack into our banks and people's personal information, then certainly, eventually, there's going to be someone who's smart enough to hack into our aircraft. If you can hack a bank, you can hack a drone.
You know, there's going to come a time when our technology is going to catch up with us. I don't worry about a guy that wants to hijack a plane. I worry about the guy who wants to hijack all the planes. There are those who are saying that in the future you won't need soldiers, that can all be fought by robots. I would beg to differ. You want to know what the war of the future looks like? Just look around. The future is with black ops.
Black ops are so imperative these days because you can use methods that aren't visible. We have the best equipment and we have the best capabilities to be able to deploy anywhere in the world within 24 hours. You combine that with the technology of the future and we're unstoppable at this point.
The reality of life as we know it on this planet today is the enemy could be anywhere and it could be anyone.
Our teams are capable of operating with nothing. But right now I've got a robot flying above me, laser-guided weapons, guys on radios that can talk back to the United States, and I've got so much technology down there that it is like being in a futuristic movie.
Our special operators have a message for those who would bring harm to us. That message is, you can run, but you'll only die tired.
Well, I was interested. My son is a gamer, and in fact, we wrote a book together where the narrator's voice is a gamer about the video game effects literature. And his short project for New York Film Academy was a political film. It was a story, and in the story was issues around 911 truth movement. And so he's very certainly into that idea, but when I talked to him about your film and these ideas, he had the immediate angry response. You know, I didn't at the time say, there's a little contradiction here, you know? And he just flipped it off and, oh, that's silly, what's the point? You know, and like you said in your film, it's just a game. And so, just like in the sense of okay, there's demonstrators in front of the White House with placards, going back and forth in terms of, whatever the issue is, here you're doing it in another reality, demonstrating in a variety of creative ways. Do you think it's having a different kind of impact? Is it having an impact? What do you think?
Depends on one's context for understanding where politics happens. As you mentioned, this is one of the points that all three of these projects were trying to bring up, is that in politics, in terms of how we interface and understand war, is gravitating to different media. Right now, it's gravitating from the television screen, from the newspaper, into other media that were heretofore considered entertainment media only, and kind of off limits to these political realities.
Yeah.
So it's a threatening migration. It threatens the idea that there's this clean line between the news media and entertainment media.
Yes.
And when something that someone considers apolitical and pretty much free of all those political entailments and having to consider values and, feeling guilt about political events and our complicity in them, in fact, start to characterize entertainment media, that's a very threatening thing, because it means that we have now a responsibility to engage them as political.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think particularly salient as you see live TV viewing is going down. It's overall TV viewing actually is up, but it's not live. And how there's multimedia using your iPad while you're watching something on television. You're spending hours and hours in Second Life or WoW or whatever the case may be. That virtual worlds are increasingly dominating our lived lives. And so that, yeah, that's where we would expect to see political activism, just like we expect to see advertising and cybersex and all kinds of other real-world activities being imported.
Yeah, I just read the other day that the average American spends about 8.5 hours a day on average in front of a screen, whatever that screen may be.
Yeah. And it's not a single screen anymore. And so I know in my students, and I'm sure yours as well, they've got their laptops on, they're checking their Twitter feed or Facebook on their cell phones. They're, and it does. It's those of us who are a little older, it can be a hard world to adjust to. But certainly that reality, and I think it's great that there are some who are saying, okay, if we're going to live increasingly, as you say, in front of a screen, or as I would say, in a virtual world, then, these boundaries between them begin to break down, and we have to own some of what's going on.
The military, industrial, and entertainment complex, whatever you want to call it, like to actually kind of engage it on its own terms, I think is sometimes extremely important. It shows the possibility of using the media in kind of the same way that the Army exploits that media.
If you start from the ground and build knowledge, inform people, I think the change might take a longer time, but it's a true change.
Returning Fire, Interventions in Video Game Culture, a movie produced and directed by Roger Stahl and distributed by the Media Education Foundation.